can everybody hear me? Okay, just want to make sure. Working with technology, working with technology today. So, welcome to Sport Conversations for Change on this April 8th, 2021. And again, welcome to the Institute for the Study of Sports, Society, and Social Change and our digital platform and webinar. I'm Dr. Akila Carter-Francique, the Executive Director for the Institute for the Study of Sports, Society, and Social Change here at San Jose State University. And I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Dr. Amy August. She's our Assistant Director for the Institute. And as some of you may know, some of you may not know, some of the rich history of our wonderful Institute is that it started in 2017 as the brainchild of Dr. Harry Edwards. When we talk about the Institute, it's one that really lives on to promote the legacy of equity and social justice at San Jose State University, and that lives within the caverns of the Olympic Project for Human Rights. The mission of the Institute is that it is dedicated to research, analysis, and education at the intersection of sport and society. So to learn more about our Institute and how to be a part of change, go to sjsuwordstoaction.com. and our other social media platforms of Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, as I just showed you on the previous slide. Today's conversation is entitled, Where Are We Now? The State of College Athletics in 2021. This conversation will feature college sport leaders, practitioners, and two rising, I have to put that emphasis there, they're so amazing, two rising social justice advocacy students from SJSU's Department of Athletics. So we've got Annalisa Roning joining us and Christian Webb. So again, follow us using that hashtag SJSU Words to Action. So over the next hour, our sport conversation will serve as an opportunity to assess the current day management and experiences of intercollegiate athletics. And so with that, I want you to sort of look at this slide. We've got a lot of sort of images here. But one of the things when I think of college athletics from 2020 to 2021, most of us may have come to our mind COVID-19, all right? But then we had sort of return to home. Then we had Black Lives Matter, then return to school, a season canceled, a season played, and still we've got SB 206, hashtag Me Too, athlete activism, diversity, equity, and inclusion via the ADID, designation position that was created recently by the NCAA. We've got issues and challenges as it pertains to mental health, wellness, and even illness. We've got coaches being hired, coaches being fired, athletes that are transferring. So we're going to get into a hodgepodge of things today. So I want you to sit back, hold your seats, grab something to drink, perhaps get a notebook to learn about many of the issues, challenges, and things that we need to think about for the future as we talk about the state of college athletics. So I thank you for joining us today. And I invite you again to raise your hand as we explore the state of college athletics. If you would like to share your story, or if you have any questions of interest, place them in the chat box and we will do our best to work those questions in. So as we commence today's conversation, I want to conduct a little survey just to kind of see, where are we? And in many ways, sort of a mental health review. Because again, our theme is focused on mental health and wellness, our highs, our lows, and to really sort of think about what of those things that we've talked about in words and how have individuals manifested those into action. So we're going to probably throw a little poll out just to kind of see who's in the audience today, see who we got going on as it pertains. I think we've got a few people here. So thank you for taking the time to join us. As we do that, I wanted to introduce our esteemed panel that we have to discuss where are we now, the state of college athletics in 2021. Okay. So today we have joining us Sabrina Martin, who is a learning specialist and academic advisor. In this role, she's responsible for providing academic counseling to at-risk student athletes with unique educational needs, along with supporting incoming freshmen in the academic transition from high school to college level academia. Prior to San Jose State, Ms. Martin served as a teacher for children with special developmental needs and has a seasoned career providing mentorship and counseling to individuals at a professional level. She earned her BFA in interior design and master's in counseling education from San Jose State University. You've been here, okay. Wow, wonderful, wonderful. She resides in San Jose with her husband and is a mother of two. The Martin family are supporters of eradicating social and racial injustice, working with the Black communities and other advocacy groups to help champion these particular causes. She's passionate about educational system and is heightened with motherhood, working in K-12 settings to further support children's learning experiences. She's involved in a number of things. She's been on TV and been interviewed in our local community, just doing a lot of outreach and holding some great conversation. We also have joining us today, Dr. Richard Southall. I'm so excited. I'm so excited, you guys. He is a professor in the Department of Sport and Entertainment Management at the University of South Carolina, and also serves as the director for the College Sport Research Institute. He earned his bachelor's in English, summa cum laude. I need to put that in there, right? From Western Colorado University, and an MA in pedagogy and EDD in sport management from the University of Northern Colorado. Again, as I said, he's the director of the College Sport Research Institute and at the University of South Carolina, which conducts research examining NCAA collegiate model of athletics and sponsors the annual CSRI conference on college sports, which we just had a couple of weeks ago. Check it out. In addition, with that College Sport Research Institute, they have their own journal, the Journal of Issues in Intercollegiate Athletics. So if you're looking for some great research, some great resources pertaining to all the topics we will talk about today and more, please check out that journal. While he's at the University of South Carolina, you have to know that Dr. Southall also teaches courses in college sport business ethics, and management theory. In addition, as a professional association of diving instructors course director, Southall teaches scuba diving courses from open water to instructor level and offers marketing and operations consultancy in the scuba diving industry. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Now, one of the things is that we had another panelist that was going to join us today, Dr. I.S. Keno Miller. He's sort of a household name. He was here with us a year ago talking about college sports. Unfortunately, he's unable to be with us today, but we will have some video excerpts from him. He's a licensed psychologist again, and a professor at Florida State University. So he will share some insights as it pertains to mental health and wellness today. Now, we've got some other people that we're going to highlight, and they're actually going to be our first up. And I really wanted to take an opportunity to highlight our students in this moment and to understand what their experiences have been over the past few months. So Dr. August and I are gonna popcorn some questions to them real quick, but I'm gonna read their bios for us so we know a little bit more about who they are. So as I said, we have a special feature student panel, and I wanted to highlight Annie Roney, who is an Institute intern. She interned for us in our first cohort in the fall of 2020. She's also a master's student in kinesiology athletic training here at San Jose State. As a graduate student, her concentration is in sport management, and she's also worked as a certified athletic trainer with college athletics. During the fall semester, again, she interned with our institute and assisted in producing the first, yes, first, virtual conference that we had. She is planning to graduate this spring, so she's looking for a job, y'all, right? And focus her research on post-concussion syndrome in student athletes. We also have joining us, again, I'm very excited. I'm just super excited today. Christian Webb. He's a football student athlete and a master's student in interdisciplinary studies here at San Jose State University. In his fourth season as a Spartan, competing for playing time at a linebacker position. He's had 32 games played in his first 3 seasons, first joined the team in 2018. And in 2018, 2019, he was an academic All-Mountain West and award recipient. Woohoo! He's earned his bachelor's degree majoring in communication studies. And as I said, he's currently pursuing his master's degree in communication studies and a student of mine, I'm proud to say, that we're presenting today some research, but served also, his outreach is very important, his activism is very important. And one of the things is that he served as a 2020 intern with the African American Community Service Agency of San Jose. And quite interesting, I'm going to be on a platform with them later tonight. So stay tuned to the Institute and to all things sport, society, and social change. So with that said, wanted to kind of open up with an initial question. And I know Dr. August, I want to throw it to you to ask this first question to Annie and to Christian about their experiences.
Sure. Yeah. So I think let's start with Annie. Annie, what was your initial reaction at the onset of COVID-19 and the shutdown of collegiate athletics as a graduate student and a young professional in athletic training?
Yeah, absolutely. Similar to what most people were feeling was just loads of uncertainty. When I went into the profession of athletic training, two of the first things you think are sports and healthcare, something that's never going to go away. And so when we had that complete shift to an online environment, it was something none of us had ever experienced before. So at the forefront of that was, how is that going to affect our patient care? How are we going to be able to do any hands-on treatment when we can't even see our athletes? Because at that point, early on from March to May, we were completely at home. Like, we weren't seeing any of our athletes, and then making sure they adhere to their rehab programs. So just wondering at that time how long this was going to last. Are our athletes going to be able to stay healthy? Really, what are injuries going to look like when they do get back to competition? So those are things that we had no idea the longevity of what was going to happen. And that was something we had to adapt to. And of course, a huge wave of mental health, as well, as many of these athletes were still in the city that they were competing in with their school. So for me, that was San Francisco. International athletes still stuck in the city, not able to go home and see their families. So really honing in on that mental health aspect as well, because we did have limited resources at our smaller university. So kind of taking on that role as an athletic trainer too. And then in terms of being a grad student, thankfully for me, the transition to online wasn't too bad in terms of curriculum, but really what I noticed the most was just the lack of motivation and inspiration. I really thrive off of those social situations, even just passing people in the halls, talking to your professor before or after class. So just trying to adapt and stay motivated, stay inspired was something that was probably the most challenging for me.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing. It does sound like there were a lot of, unanticipated challenges that you worked to overcome. So thanks, we appreciate that. And then Christian, to kind of turn the same question to you, as a college athlete, what was your initial reaction to the onset of COVID and finding out that collegiate athletics would be shut down? How did you react initially?
Yeah, my initial reaction, it's really complicated, right? So when COVID first started, I actually had just had surgery. So we were in the middle of spring ball and I just had surgery. Everything, it was minor, it wasn't anything too major. So I was actually recovering and everyone around me starts freaking out. I'm checking social media. I'm stuck inside my room. I'm in my dorm, playing video games, watching TV, and everyone's freaking out. I hear about like there's no toilet paper. I'm like, what's going on? But for me, it was different because when everything got shut down, I knew I couldn't return home. Because back home, both my parents are high risk. My mother has lupus and my dad has diabetes. So when that happened, the first thing on my mind was, if I go home and I bring COVID home, what's going to happen to my mother? That was at the forefront of my mind. So initially I was like, okay, I need to start working and I need to get a job. I need to figure out how I'm going to make this work. Campus was like, oh, we're going to shut down. Dorms are closing. The school semester is going to transfer to an online platform. It was my first semester in grad school. One of my ethnography courses was actually working on a project to talk about the student homelessness issue that we have on campus and how to solve that and how to combat that. So while we're doing all this, I had a ton of stuff going on. I got an internship at the African American Community Service Agency, and that truly let me engage with the community. So after I was able to walk again, I was able to see just how COVID was affecting people on a day-to-day basis within our community and just how many people needed help with our disadvantaged community members. It was difficult. And I realized like, okay, I have problems, but there's people out here who have real problems. People out here who are out of jobs, low on food, struggling, dealing with having to see COVID face to face on a daily basis, and they can't escape it. So for me, it was really a matter of figuring out a way how I can impact the community. And we did a ton of that with the agency. And then after that, COVID it took a different turn, because with all the time that we had, I got to focus on things outside of my athletic career, and life kind of slowed down. And it was special, like Annie was talking about, like the emphasis on mental health. That was important to me because as an athlete, oftentimes you put your mental health to the side outside of being good at what you do. You don't really check in with yourself on a personal level. And that was something I had to discover for myself. I had to figure out, hey, how do I make sure Christian, the person, is okay? Not just Christian, the athlete, or Christian, the professional. So balancing those multiple identities was really important. And I'm glad I actually got time to work on that. And I hope that other athletes who got more time off, I hope that they were able to take time to figure out things to make themselves better and make themselves healthier. Because I look at COVID as kind of like a special year, because it was a year in which you could really do a lot of things that you don't have time to do. And that's special because as an athlete, you're on a clock. You're on a 4-year clock to make everything happen as fast as possible. Most people are trying to save money. They're trying to keep their scholarship. They're trying to maximize their opportunity. But in the midst of all the bad things that went on, COVID was a time for us to maximize our opportunity within ourselves. And that was really important to me.
So to that point, oh my gosh, you all shared so much richness, just again, because I think oftentimes some of us feel, as college students, you are just studying and that's it. But to hear the weight of COVID was just as much as, I think, for those of us that were either working at the university, that were at home. There were a lot of challenges, I think, that we all went through. And again, I think the emphasis on mental health and wellness is something that we're going to emphasize today and talk about. But, it's important to know that it affected everyone in every way. So with that said, you all were engaged and in the throes of being advocates and activists. So what I want to do is just kind of ask, can you share 1 or 2 pieces of advice for college athletic programs or even the greater university to help prepare young professionals, Annie, to you, for life with limited athletics to play? So for both of you all, both Christian and Annie, sort of fill in the blank, give us some insight from your perspective on what athletic programs should need to do to prepare you all for the next level, if you will. So Annie, I'll go with you first.
Yeah, so I think especially viewing myself as a young professional in athletics, but also the role that I play in my athletes under my care in their lives. Something that anyone who works at any level in athletics can do is just listen. Put yourself in a position where you're available to be spoken to, have those student athletes, all of their issues and their struggles. Make yourself available so they have somebody that they can speak to. And it can be on any subject matter in terms of what you can do to listen, what you can do in your position, whether you have a seat at the table or not, you probably know somebody who does. So carrying that up the chain, because, as we know this past year, our student athletes have already made so many sacrifices to play their sports for their universities. And that was, exacerbated tenfold during COVID-19, putting themselves and potentially others at risk for their health to continue out this execution of college sport. So really what we can do as athletic departments in return is to be an open ear for them, be an advocate for them, because so many times, especially at the administrative level, I feel like there's a disconnect. Like oftentimes you can have that relationship with your athletic trainer, have that relationship with your coach, but sometimes it feels like it stops there and you're in a position where you don't know where to go further than that. And so I think if you are in an administrative position, just making yourself seen, being in a position where you can be in communication with your student athletes and just helping them with their needs, I think is first and foremost, because they have a lot to say. They've gone through a lot in this past year. And we all know that that is something that is incredibly unique to their entire lives, same with us. And so really just being in a position where you can advocate for them, listen, and then in terms of just listening, you also want to execute. So you want to follow through with whatever those conversations are and making sure you're doing what you can to help see change within your department.
Great, thank you. And, the same to you, Christian. Can you share one or two pieces of advice for our college athletic programs, or again, the broader university, to help prepare college athletes, right, for life with limited athletics and play?
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to take a moment to say you're spot on. You talked a lot about listening to people, being heard, and advocating. And while you were talking about that, I just wanted to bring up a couple points. So for athletic departments, I feel like it's paramount for them to take this opportunity to be more and do more. Dive into your student athletes, see what it is that drives them outside of their sports, right? And he talked about listening. You need to listen to your student athlete. Listen to the social justice and the activism pieces that they truly care about, the things that affect their heart. Listen to them on a level outside of them as an athlete. Get to understand them, figure out ways to support them, figure out ways to connect them with community members, alumni. I mean, like San Jose State has a huge alumni base in the Bay Area. How can we do more outreach and connect your student athletes with people in the local community so that they can go out and get their foot in the door? Oftentimes as athletes, we sacrifice a lot to play the sport that we play. And I feel like it's important for the administration, your coaches, your academic advisors to listen to you, pay attention to you, and understand where it is that you fall short so they can push you to be more in those areas. Because if they just let you slide, they're doing you a disservice. They're doing you a disservice with how much time that you put in, how hard they've pushed you to get good grades, to understand your coursework material. So I feel like right now it's an important time, and it's important for us to just follow through and to execute, like Annie said. So yeah, I think those.
Thank you. Yeah. No, all great words. And again, typically we say sort of from the mouths of babes, but y'all are young adults. You have lived this life. You have endured a lot over these past few months, and that is definitely some wisdom that we need to take to heart. So we thank you for stopping by to join us today. We know you are busy people. And so again, thank you. We're going to take those words and have those really help sort of catapult us into our conversation for today that we have with some amazing faculty and athletic administrators that are joining us. So with that said, we're going to move into the next phase of our conversation of where are we now, the state of college athletics. So I hope that, what Christian and Annie shared did shed some light on life after college athletics and what we need to be mindful of. But today I want to get into a few things. Really, again, where are we now? So the state of college athletics, what does that mean with respect to coaches, administrators, and staff? And to the point that we just had here, our college athletes. We also want to talk a little bit about experiential learnings. These past 10 months have been 12 months, I guess we're in now, have been quite amazing. So what issues and concerns and in many ways deficiencies have been illuminated during these times? And I'm kind of playing with words here. This notion that change is going to come. So this sort of quote serves in many ways to find out, is change going to come? But thinking of the voice of Sam Cooke, is a change going to come when we talk about sport and social justice? So what are some of those best practice policies and procedures that we need to have moving forward? So again, we have an esteemed panel that are joining us. Sabrina Martin, learning specialist from SJSU and also an academic advisor. We're going to have some some notes and words of wisdom from Dr. Miller's Corner, as I'm going to call it for today. And then our esteemed panelists as well, Dr. Richard Southall, coming to us from University of South Carolina, the College Sport Research Institute. Okay, so to get us started on the state of college athletics, Dr. Southall, what do you feel is the significance of sport in society today, 1 year post notification of the coronavirus arrival in the US? Let's get you unmuted, I think. Right in front of you.
There it is.
There you go. There you go.
So and I said, if I mute myself, then I have to remember to unmute. And of course I didn't do it, but that's okay. I think a couple of things that we might want to think about when we're looking at sport. There's sport in the context of play. There's sport in the context of competition, team competition or individual competition. And then there's sport in the context of entertainment or the product. So I think what we found in this COVID-19 pandemic situation is the importance of play, getting out and exercising and interacting with each other in a playful manner. And I think that's been one of the things that has been a challenge for people of all ages, but specifically for young children, adolescents, and on into adults. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is that many of our sports involve close proximity to each other. We invade each other's space in many ways in many sports. In team sports, that may be part of the function of the sport itself is some sort of an invasion. Even when we're running next to each other or swimming next to each other, or you're competing when you're wrestling or when you're playing field hockey or any of those things. And so I think what this has shown us is that we are interconnected, and how difficult it is for us in sport to do isolated sport. I'm a solitary exerciser, but I know many friends who are group exercisers, and they like the group setting or the team setting or those sorts of things. So I think that's been something that has been important for us to recognize. And the last thing is sport is entertainment. And I research college sport, and I primarily research Power 5 football and men's and women's basketball on the Power 5 or the high Division I level. And what I think we've surely found is that entertainment is a product that people want, and the athletes that provide the product of sport, whether they are professional athletes, and I put that in quotation marks, or college athletes, we have found that college athletes, particularly football, Power 5 football and men's basketball and women's basketball players, have been deemed essential workers because we wanted the games to continue, and everybody did everything they could so we could have a college football playoff and championships if we could. But then men's and women's basketball championship tournaments had to be held. It was almost a societal imperative that take place. So I think I hope that answered the question, but I think there's a lot of interaction individually and as a society that sport is really part of.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think it's really helpful to kind of analyze the impact of sport and the significance of sport within the context of play and physical activity, as well as the context of sport as entertainment. So we really appreciate that. And then the next question is for Ms. Sabrina Martin. From your particular role and your relationship to intercollegiate athletes and intercollegiate athletics as a department, where are we now, or what is the state of intercollegiate athletics as you see it from your position?
Thank you, Amy. I feel that the state of athletics and within the collegiate area it's changed. And I think it's changed for the better. I believe like after COVID and with Black Lives Matter, it's given the student athletes a little bit more of a voice, a little bit more humanized outside of just being entertainment. And I think that is a huge positive that can come out of where we've been in the last year. Dr. Richard, you mentioned the entertainment piece, and I have got 2 young ones that are playing sports, and with them not playing sports, I realized like, oh, my personal entertainment has gone down to 0. But it also, like Christian Webb mentioned, it also allowed us to see student athletes as students. And it gave us a year of understanding and giving them a year of understanding who they are without, playing basketball, playing softball, playing football, So I think it's just going to make sport and society even stronger and better moving forward.
Let me unmute myself too. Thank you for sharing that. This notion of the humanity of student athletes is very important. And I wanted us to sort of get into some of the commentary that we heard from Christian and Annie with respect to the mental health and wellness. And so wanted to bring in the voice of Keno Miller. And one of the questions I first asked him was, what were the mental health challenges of college athletes prior to COVID-19? And have these challenges remained the same, or have new challenges erupted? And so I want us to sort of listen to his response.
Next question. As a psychologist and keeping the full confidentiality of my client, what were the mental health challenges of college athletes prior to COVID-19? Have these challenges remained the same, or have new challenges erupted? Prior to the pandemic, mental health challenges for college athletes typically revolved around anxiety, depression, performance, and interpersonal conflict. Within the past year, I would add isolation and an increase in player-coach conflicts. Furthermore, there have been calls for coaches to be more transparent and culturally aware. In addition, there's been a push for greater diversity among mental health providers, and all that is a positive.
Mm-hmm. And, that was sort of his initial conversation. And then from that, I wanted to understand from him, what were some of the best practices best practices or trainings, if you will, because we've seen a lot of DEI be pushed day in and day out. You can hit Google and find a million DEI trainings. But what were some of the best practices and trainings that athletic departments could adopt to prepare for college athletes return to campus and competition? And here is his commentary on that.
What best practices and or training should athletic departments adopt to prepare for college athletes' return to campus and competition? I believe that college athletes returning to campus and competition should be met by their athletic department's willingness to offer mental health screenings, psychosocial education and resources, trainings, focusing again on advocacy, mental health, and well-being. Furthermore, I believe that athletic departments should continue to solicit input from players when it comes to improving name, image, and likeness legislation. This would include further transparency and talks in regards to compensation. This is based upon an even more apparent finding that student athletes in revenue generating sports are in fact commodities who represent a quantifiable bottom line and benefits to many of these programs, towns, and communities.
Oh, okay. So I know Dr. Southall about to go in on this. So I want to kind of, piggyback off of what Dr. Miller said in reference to the mental health and wellness challenges then and now, in addition to sort of the best practices trainings. But I think in many ways, he got to the point of the commodity, the entertainment, the performative value that athletes play for our universities and for our greater society, which Doc, I know you hit a lot on. With that said, some schools chose not to have their athletes return to play, for example, HBCUs, while others push for athletes to return despite not having the vaccine or special protocols for social distancing. So based on that, what was the impact for those athletic departments? And you can speak in any vein, from a financial to a personnel or even, a student athlete perspective.
Well, I think what we have is we talk about college sport writ large, and as if all 1,200 or thereabouts NCAA member institutions are the same, and they're not. Various colleges and universities have different educational missions. They serve different populations. They have different athletic department structures, and then they have different cost-benefit analysis that they perform. So I don't think that it's any surprise that colleges and universities that have less of a profit orientation, and I use that term in the same vein that Professor Rick Karcher at Eastern Michigan uses the term profit, is that which is left over after all of the obligations are paid for at an athletic department. And so what Albion College, a Division III college in Michigan, views as its mission and its cost benefit analysis to bringing athletes back onto campus or students back onto campus are going to be different than the University of South Carolina, for example, where one of our priorities was to bring students back to campus for on-campus, face-to-face instruction as soon as possible. And we made cost-benefit analyses on various sports and various competitions and whether we're going to do that. And it's not surprising that the sports that have the higher profile and media rights deals that have been more commodified, they made a cost-benefit analysis that X amount of millions of dollars in a media rights deal that is going to be voided if we don't return and hold the games. That's just a different situation. So I think that many colleges and universities, you do the best you can and do your risk mitigation. You provide as good of support services for your athletes as you can. And then we do the same thing for our students. So here at the University of South Carolina, we are back to face-to-face instruction, and our governor has mandated that state employees need to be fast-tracked to return to the workforce or to the workplace. Other states may not have that same risk analysis that's taken place. So, I think it was very important on a number of different levels that the basketball tournaments for the Division I, March Madness for the men and women's basketball championship for the women were held. And part of that is the cultural fabric that college sport writ large, big time college sport holds in our society. We want normalcy as a society as much as possible. So the athletes that were asked to form a bubble or take part in a bubble in Indianapolis and in San Antonio were fundamentally in many ways operating under a model that was first pioneered by the NHL and the NBA earlier on in the pandemic. So we people are trying to do the best they can to do what they do. So I think that's important to recognize that the sports that are more commodified had more of an incentive to return to play, and those that didn't have as much financial incentive made other decisions oftentimes.
Thanks. Yeah, it's really fascinating to hear how that risk analysis plays out like tangibly in terms of the actions taken in different geographic locations as well as in professional sports, and how that kind of process differed depending on their the particular orientation of those organizations to financial profit that could be making.
We did the same thing when we were asking people that work in grocery stores to go to work. And people that work in other essential services. And so we as a society, or we as an athletic department, we as a college or university, we make those judgments, and you do the best you can within the constraints that you have, that you're operating within.
Yeah. I mean, excellent point. And then I want to kind of throw that to Sabrina. From your vantage point as an academic advisor who works with student athletes, how did you see those decisions, that decision-making process play out for, within SJSU's athletic department as well as for SJSU's athletes?
Something like Christian said, it was confusing in the beginning. It was confusing for the student athletes. Am I staying home? Am I staying on campus? Am I opting in? Am I opting out? If my sport goes back, can I stay on campus but not play? If I do opt out, because of health concerns or pre-existing conditions, am I going to lose my scholarship? What does that look like? What does my eligibility look like for like my, you know, I got 5 years to play this, 5 years to play for 4. What does that look like long-term? But from an academic perspective, for the students that did opt out, our service responsibilities were still the same for those student athletes. You know, at the time, those students were left out of communication with their coaches, and most of the times left out of that bubble with their teammates. So in that aspect, it was playing on their mental health and their identity of being a student athlete, but they weren't actively participating in being an athlete. So from an academic standpoint, it's almost like we became a little bit more enriched counselors for their mental health, and we still were trying to keep them motivated academically while they were trying to make these hard decisions on going back. You know, in sports, especially the sports that are commodified, there are a lot of times they use the words, well, it's not mandatory, but it's suggested as far as practice. And, you know, those are play on words, but those are things that they were concerned about with their health or their family's health. And also, we tried to just continue to support them and helping them do for self and putting tools in front of them where their self-care can take the forefront for that year, whether they're playing, not playing. Here at San Jose State, especially with our football team, we had a lot of stop and go. We had a lot of, okay, let's pick up the whole team and let's move to Humboldt. Okay, now let's pick up the whole team and now let's go to Hawaii. So they have spent a lot of time not seeing their family. And they spent a lot of time with each other. And with that, as support staff, we just had to keep grinding and keeping, you know, them focused that you're still a student, we're still here to support you, whether you're playing, whether you're in season, whether you don't know what you're going to do, if you're going to transfer. All of those things were in their mind, all while still trying to do their best with their academics.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I mean, you're leading us into sort of our next segment of the program with regards to this notion of experiential learning. A lot that you're talking about, you were learning on the job. You were having to sort of self-certify or take courses. So to that point, you know, much of what you've shared, to include again, Dr. Southall, you know, reflects the capitalistic nature of college athletics and the complexity of decision to return to play. To even include, you know, criticism by academics and academic organizations, and Dr. Southall and I are familiar with the Drake Group and the commentary that they've provided, some insightful commentary and assertions on the history and purpose-driven entity of college athletics. So, you know, Sabrina, one of the questions I want to ask you is that based on your assessment, what are some of the skill sets that athletic support staff need to become more familiar with and are honed after experiencing 2 global pandemics of COVID-19 and the social, racial realities of Black Lives Matter? And, you know, because you work with students with learning disabilities as well. But what are some of those skill sets that they need to obtain? What was even pushed and promoted for you to get?
Good question. First, I just also want to say meet students where they are socially and emotionally. And how you do that is by asking questions and listening to the student athletes, which we've heard earlier from our students that were on the panel before. Going online was hard for these students with learning disabilities. They've gone through 12 years of learning strategies that got them to a place where they could be successful at this level of academia, and all of that changed. And in some cases, the students are teaching themselves now. So support staff should learn some strategies to support the change from online to in-person classes. It would take a reassessment of the students. And in my case, I was able to leverage all of the work that I did in the K-12 system as a special educator to help move that process quickly and reassess now how are they going to learn online. I also believe that support staff should be more culturally competent. With the resurgence of Black Lives Matter, it's a way of life for some student athletes, and to ignore that would be a disservice. And it might result in the students not reaching out for academic help if needed. And some students with learning disabilities, our transfer students, our first generation students, they might have a hesitation of accessing help in a new environment. And when you're in a new environment, you tend to look for something that's familiar. And sometimes that familiarity could easily be the reason why you do reach out or the reason why you don't reach out. So in those spaces, just remember that we're the professionals and sometimes we need to reach out to them instead of waiting for them to reach out to us. And then for the faculty and our staff that may feel like, oh, I don't know how to support this student because we're not the same race. So they might want to hand them off to the Black faculty and staff on campus. And that isn't always necessarily what needs to happen. Because in that instance, you've just reaffirmed that you were not the right person for them to get help. So for myself, an example would be, I've tried to connect with the Latinx community and build a trustful relationship. And I work with all students that have AEC accommodations on the college level. And for me, I had to better understand their community and be more symbolic with what some of the things that they are going through. So what I did was, after I did my research and I went to some trainings on campus with DACA, I went ahead and I placed that butterfly in my office. And what that did is it allowed to open up the conversation.
Thank you so much for that. That was very important, just again, to learn the importance of cultural competency and being able to sort of move with the times and the challenges that students are facing. So good to hear commentary again that, you as an academic advisor, there may be things that, academic, or I should say athletic department said, hey, get this certification, that, but to hear that, you were like, listen, I'm not waiting for anybody to come from top down. Let me start Googling, see what I need to do to, engage these students and really enlist the help of other communities to really sort of service those young people. And, to your point, you become a family. And I think it rolls right into sort of the next question from Dr. Miller's Corner, to be able to understand, it's one thing for a professor, it's another for academic advisor or coach, but what can family members do? Because as you shared, as the students shared, do I go home? Do I not go home? What does that look like? To identify what can families do to support. And here is his commentary on that.
What can or should families do to support their athletes transition back to campus and competition? What about first-year college athletes that may not have had an opportunity to visit campus? I believe that families who have athletes transitioning back to campus should make sure that they are aware of all the resources which are either embedded or affiliated with athletic departments. That is nutrition, that is health and wellness, that is mental health services, all of those things which are either housed within or independently of the athletic department. I'm thinking of obviously student health when we're thinking about units housed outside of athletics. I think students should have a clear understanding of how to access those benefits and who to go speak with when they're having concerns.
And one of the other things, yes, getting them onboarded in many ways or reacquainted with those services are definitely helpful. But Sabrina, you brought up a really good point too, this notion of cultural competence, the fact that we're living in this space of, in a culture right now of Black Lives Matter activism and just heightened awareness as it relates to, anti-Black racism, challenges from the Hispanic community that they're experiencing, even from the Asian community most recently. And so I asked Dr. Miller to provide a little commentary about race and racism and how student athletes are dealing with these challenges. And here was his response.
We're looking at issues of race and racism and how they've affected the daily interaction of college athletes. I believe that issues of race and racism have been overwhelmingly apparent among today's athletes who identify as persons of color or those from historically marginalized groups. I think these issues in our society have encouraged student athletes to speak up at varied levels or with varied levels of support among athletic administrators. Sadly, I believe that the complexity of race, racism, and most importantly, white supremacy has not been addressed. I think student athletes have found it difficult to move beyond expressing their concerns without the full support of their athletic departments, coaches, and staff. I think many efforts have been snuffed out by the excitement of fall sports. There was a shift, and it appeared that the push to return to play further challenged student athletes' efforts to engage in a productive exchange of ideas rooted in changing the culture of their individual departments and programs. In my opinion, there is an increased need for cultural competency among athletic administrators, as well as trainings focused on healthy coping skills for those dealing with racism by its many names and dimensions. I believe that athletic administrators continue to grapple with these challenges at each institution. They should individually look at their own coffers to determine their role and history in the subjugation of student athletes from minority and or historically marginalized communities. After a thorough examination, they should then collectively work to promote healing and greater racial justice through educational outlets, programming, and department-wide trainings for all staff and employees. These would help address microaggressions, as well as establish and sustain a culture of collaboration, atonement, and inclusivity. Thank you.
So Dr. Miller shares a lot of important insights about the importance of doing internal research and really examining the institutions that we work within to see what they can do better to address these racial inequities that have been brought to light by all the social movements that have really gained prominence over the past year. And given that, I would imagine that we're seeing an uptick in the amount of research that's dedicated toward racial issues. It's really focusing on examining the roots of the racial unrest that's been occurring over the past year in particular, but obviously throughout much of our history in the United States. So Dr. Southall, on March 26th, you hosted the College Sport Research Institute's annual conference on the virtual campus of the University of South Carolina. First, congratulations. And then second, what were some of the hot topics of keynote conversation and the perspectives that were shared?
Well, thank you for mentioning the conference. Folks can go to csri.org and actually view all of the academic presentations, as well as the 3 panels and our keynote speaker, which we tried to address the issues that were on top of the mind, but it sort of takes we lag behind when we are getting academic research done. So now the research that's being done on the issues that Dr. Miller was talking about are just now getting into the pipeline to be peer reviewed and stuff. But one of the things that I have seen an uptick in is a research interest in examining white privilege among college athletes and college athletic departments, and also looking at the role of athlete activism and what is motivating athletes. I know that there are some colleagues that are studying what took place in the men's basketball tournament. It was almost as if there's someone does it a little lighter, and it starts, it's like not NCAA property, and then that it kind of grows a little bit, and then we have a piece on it on March Madness pregame show, and they interview a couple 3 athletes, and then it's done. And that's the same way that I think many times activism of any sort, you always have to make sure that activism doesn't get co-opted and commodified and placed on 60 Minutes or HBO Sports, and then we move on to the next thing. And so I think with the research and the hot topics, people are still looking at the issues that involve race. That's a very widely researched topic, both through CSRI and through our journal. And then the other issue is how this interplays with issues of class. Because I think that's one of the things that has really been exposed in college athletics, is that many of these decisions, when I talked earlier on about cost benefit analysis, the parents in many of the sports at different levels and in different sports, they don't want their young adult participating. And so this opting in or opting out is a different calculus for different sets of families. If I'm, again, and I don't mean to belabor the point of talking about Power 5 football, but Power 5 football is the engine that drives college sport. End of discussion. It does. Men's basketball to a lesser degree, but all that money that trickles down to the different levels is produced by athletes. And if I'm a football player at Ohio State, or if I'm a football player at Michigan, or I'm a football player at South Carolina, and I'm starting, that's a different decision that I'm going to make on whether to play or not to play. Because 83% of all football players that start in the Southeastern Conference are Black. And that's an important thing to think about, because how does that play out in the decisions that athletes and coaches and family members are making? Because if I'm playing at a Southeastern Conference football program, the chances are that 2% that the NCAA talks about that are going to go pro, so well, it's not 2% of the starting lineup at Alabama. If you're a starter at Alabama, you're going to go into a training camp in the NFL. End of discussion. You're going to be invited to a training camp. And so whether a correct decision or not, those players are going to make a different decision. And quite frankly, they're going to be more focused on their athletics than they're on their academics. That it doesn't surprise, because if you major in sport management at the University of South Carolina and you come out with a degree from our university, you're very likely going to get a job, but your starting salary is going to be $25,000 to $45,000. Whereas if you're invited to a training camp in the NFL, so it's a different calculus. So I guess, Sabrina, I think I wanted to change topics real quickly, if I could, Dr. Carter-Francik. I thought your point was extremely well taken about the transition that the athletes and the students had to make to an online Zoom environment. You also have to understand that faculty were not prepared for this. We had literally 1 week notice when the pandemic, when we closed down. We had 1 week to transition every class to online. And they purchased one Zoom meeting account for our entire college of 66 faculty. So I just said, this isn't going to work. So I just purchased my own. And my partner and I had to develop, I've learned a lot about Zoom and all this stuff in the last year, but faculty weren't prepared to be able to support students. And what do you do when you have a student in your class on a Zoom and you say, please turn on your camera, and they don't? Or you say, please, please unmute yourself, and they don't.
Right.
And then when you have a student that puts his or her camera on, and then you see them washing their car, and so this is a whole new normal that we've had to deal with.
Right.
And I really fundamentally think that everybody's trying to do the best they can, but nobody wrote this playbook. There was no owner's manual for us to figure this out. So, I know you guys in the academic, athletic, and support environment, it was just like, okay, what?
Yeah,
do we do?
it was interesting because the accountability piece that we had when we were on campus was great, right? Our coaches would go and check in and see if the kids were in class, right? If we would get at-risk reports and we could notify the coaches and the coaches could have that conversation with the student athlete, and accountability was quick and efficient. You know, it sounds like state our football players had to sit in the front row of classes. So how do we, like you said, how do we have them turn their Zooms on, their cameras on, to make sure that they are being diligent in their academics? It was tough. It was really tough. But we
It was
definitely,
challenging. Yeah, it was challenging for all of us. I know we were blessed, I would say, at SJSU because at the time we had actually created 3-week sort of trainings for all of our professors to get trained in Zoom. But I don't know that that was really something that was because of COVID, or I think we actually already had it in the works. So it was beneficial for us. So I was in there trying to figure it out. And to this day, I'm still calling Dr. August. I'm like, how do we do this? To try to figure this out. So I'm definitely not a Zoom master, and Beth, who's on the other end, is self-certified. So we are definitely learning when it comes to those classroom behaviors, expectations, how to be culturally competent in a virtual space. There's so many challenges. And then also just to be mindful of, you know, one of the things that I try to encourage, I know with my students, is put a background on, because we don't know everybody's living situation. Some of my students were actually Zooming from their car because that was the only quiet place that they could have. So we were met with so many challenges, and I can't imagine, as a former student athlete, I can't imagine having to balance all of those things at this time. Do I go home? Do I not go home? Because I went to a school in the state of Texas, and at the time my parents lived in Illinois. So what do you do in that respect? So many things I think that came from that. I think with that, it kind of sort of moves to this third subject topic of change is going to come. You know, will it? In the last segment, you know, I definitely want to acknowledge what all the panelists shared today that may leave some of us on this platform worried, perhaps a little stressed, or others pleasantly surprised by the inroads that you all have taken, and that you all and your peers and some of your colleagues have taken to take next steps and changes. So based on that, what are the next steps? And to that point, you know, Dr. Southall, you know, based on your scholarship that you've done, your conference leadership, and the conversations you've held, you know, what should the NCAA consider as we move towards the immediate future and long-term culture of intercollegiate athletics, whether it be finances, mental health and wellness trainings, cultural competence, integration of student athletes into the broader university, or just even, you know, working to seek support from esteemed faculty such as yourself to really support that athletic departments in making the shift?
I would advocate for this is the time to reevaluate our 100-year-old collegiate model. I think that there are more efficient and more just ways to organize college athletics. I see no reason that there needs to be simply one NCAA. I think that while we've gone from adopted business models in Division I that's much more academic capitalism and athletic capitalism, I don't think that same model is appropriate on the Division III level. I don't think all sports need to be under one governing structure. So what I would advocate for is let's look and be involved in truth telling, just like what I thought was very important was with the incoming administration. My hope was just tell us the truth. That's all we want. That's on a large nationwide level. I think the same thing needs to be done in college athletics. Just tell us the truth. Tell us that the fact of the matter is that Power 5 football and men's basketball is different than Division I field hockey or Division III lacrosse. There's nothing wrong with differentiating what we're doing. And so instead of trying to fit the proverbial round peg into a square hole or whatever way you want to do it, let's just have truth telling and bring everybody involved to the table. What concerns me is that we still haven't moved beyond referring to college athletes as kids, which is a form of paternalism that I think is designed to control them. And we have a long history of in parentis, all of that stuff, in loco parentis and so on. So my advocacy would be, let's just be honest and let's work together to come up with a more just and equitable system.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really exciting to imagine what such a system would look like if we were to reinvent it pretty much from scratch and try to address all the inequality that it's currently enabling. And then to turn to you, Sabrina, you've put in so much effort, and you've put forward tremendous effort to support college athletes in their academic efforts, also in their athletic participation. You've helped them to navigate the realities of COVID-19 and to engage in activism. And we really commend you for those efforts. But what we're interested in is if you could share with our audience what you're doing to take care of yourself. So what self-care measures are you engaging in to be able to kind of endure this through the long haul?
Absolutely. I did want to start, I wouldn't be remiss without saying that this past year has illuminated many things across college campuses. However, myself and San Jose State, and I'm sure other colleges, were just unprepared due to the lack of Black representation on campus. And it created a lot of scrambling and time wasted. So I believe that we didn't have the impact that we could have at the onset, and we do need to do better in those spaces. Dr. Carter Francique and the Institute, you guys were so invaluable during this time for San Jose State and for myself and for athletics by offering multiple conferences geared towards college athletics. And that in itself was part of my self-care. It also served as a little bit of counseling and therapy for myself to learn more and to figure out how to support our students of color more effectively by inviting us to conferences and allowing the support staff to just find a way to support our student athletes. So I do want to say thank you for that, and for the Institute being so willing and welcoming and pretty much giving us the infrastructure and introducing outlets for learning and for well-being. For myself, as far as self-care, I also try to educate my children along the way. I'm raising 2 young student athletes who are now noticing that microaggression and the lack of representation in the public schools is real. I check in with my family often. I have 2 older sisters that are very successful, one in a corporate 500 corporation, the other one's a Hall of Fame D1 student athlete, and she's a principal at a public school. And of course, my husband, who hears all the stories on a daily basis. And what we talk about is the daily microaggressions, and I mean daily. And there has to be checks and balances on which ones I ignore and which ones I kind of go head in on. I also try and put myself in social groups outside of work. I have my children in Green Scholars Program, which is a STEM program for African American students. I put myself in Jack and Jill, which is a women's group where I can bring my family around, other.
Jack and Jill alum, sorry.
Nice. So that's what I do for my family. Now, the biggest self-care that I do for myself, and it's for me and for me only, is I find a way to stay grounded and rooted. And I've been listening to D Nice and Club Quarantine on Instagram for the last year, and I'll end with saying that DJ saved my life. Thank you.
Perfect. And a great way to close. There's so much more that we can get into. Dr. Southall, I think we need to do something, between institutes to really sort of continue these conversations. But I want to thank both of you for coming and sharing your voices today. Also, a big thank you to Dr. Keno Miller for sharing with us his words of wisdom from Florida State. With that said, just in some final kind of closing remarks, is Remember the Institute, that again, to speak up, use your voice when we talk about words to action. We definitely encourage you all to give to the Institute so we can continue programming like this and support student research as we're doing with Christian and Annie and their great work and efforts, and visit our SJSU Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Library to visit all of our wonderful collections, to include the Dr. Harry Edwards collection. In closing, I wanted to just encourage you all to, listen to what Sabrina said. A DJ saved my life. Find what you can do for self-care. And at the same time, to use some of the resources that Dr. Richard Southall shared with us today. Again, he's coming to us from the University of South Carolina College Sport Research Institute. He's got some wonderful work that he's written that you can see on this slide here today, regarding NCAA graduation rates, cheering on the collegiate model, as well as some oral testimony that he's given at the U.S. Senate Committee with respect to student athletes. I also want to encourage you to utilize one of these resources. And again, with the Institute, we have honed in on mental health and wellness for our students, for our faculty, for our staff, and our amazing professors that are all working in this space of COVID, Black Lives Matter, the new quote unquote normal, but to adopt some resilience in the face of crisis. And he shares these tips on the things that you need to sort of keep in mind, from focus on what you can control, challenge catastrophic thoughts, be in the present, find your priorities, and practice self-care after loss, whatever that may be for you. And so keep those things in mind. I want each and every one of you to thank our wonderful panelists for being here today, to include our special feature with Annie Roning and Christian Webb, our amazing students, activists, and just rising scholars as well. And thank you all for joining this conversation today. It's been such a pleasure. I know we've learned a lot. I know we've got much more to discuss, but as we always say, we want you to definitely take your words, take these words, and turn them into action. So continue to join us. Look for us on our various platforms. Again, at SJSU Words to Action, our Facebook page, our Instagram, and even our Twitter. So we look forward to seeing and connecting with you on our next conversation for change. Thank you all. Bye.